Miguel Ramos knew every creak of the 7-Eleven's floor tiles. At 2 in the morning, the store smelled faintly of burned coffee and lemon cleaner, and the only sounds were the low hum of the refrigeration units and the occasional slap of the automatic door when a late-night customer wandered in for gas or cigarettes. It was his quiet time, the part of the shift he liked best. He counted cigarette cartons, checked the lottery machine, and wiped down the counter while his coworkers Tasha in the stockroom. And Ben slouched over his phone, finished the last of the night's chores. The freezer in the back had always been a nuisance. Its seals sweated, its handle stuck, and a film of frost gathered on the inside of the glass doors, no matter how many times they defrosted it. Miguel tugged it open to restock the frozen burritos and felt the usual blast of icy air. He exhaled and froze. A shape swam through the fog on the inside of the glass. For a second he thought it was his own reflection. The outline was wrong. A woman's face pressed against the condensation, eyes wide, mouth parted as if pleading. He blinked hard, face blurred, then vanished, leaving only a faint smear of moisture. He rubbed the glass with his sleeve. Nothing. Probably the reflection of a passing car, he told himself, though the parking lot was empty. Still the image stayed with him, dark hair plastered across pale cheeks, lips moving without sound. The rest of the shift passed in small distractions. Customers drifted through. Tasha joked about the squeaky freezer hinge, and Ben filmed a short video of himself juggling candy bars for his social feed. Miguel kept glancing at the freezer door, half expecting the face to reappear. When he locked up at dawn, he told himself he was overtired. The next night, the store felt different. The air in the back room seemed colder, and a thin mist clung to the edges of the freezer glass even before he opened it. As he stocked shelves, Tasha came in with a box of sandwiches. "Did you clean this door?" she asked, peering at a faint smudge. Miguel crouched beside her. A new shape had formed in the condensation, another face, features blurred but unmistakably human. This time, he wasn't alone in seeing it. Tasha touched the glass with the edge of a paper towel. The image dissolved, but a single streak of cheap red lipstick remained on the plastic wrapper of a frozen pizza. "That's creepy," she murmured. "Looks like Sonia's shade. Remember her?" "She disappeared last month," Miguel remembered. Sonia Patel, the day shift cashier who'd left after a late delivery and never come back. Police said she might have run off, but her family didn't believe it. He found himself checking the freezer every half hour. Each time he opened it, a brief shape bloomed in the fog. A nose, a pair of startled eyes, gone before he could focus. Around 3, Ben wandered back with his phone out. "Let me see this ghost fridge," Ben said. He opened the door and filmed as cold air billowed. Through the mist, a pale face swam into view, clear enough that all 3 of them gasped. It wasn't a trick of light. The eyes stared directly at the camera. A finger lifted and pointed outward from inside the glass. Ben swore and dropped the phone. The image faded to nothing. When they replayed the video a minute later, the finger's motion was unmistakable. Ben uploaded the clip to a neighborhood forum despite Miguel's protests. Within hours, it was being shared with captions about haunted convenience stores. Comments speculated about ghosts, pranks, even carbon dioxide leaks. Miguel wanted to believe one of those explanations, but the tight knot in his stomach said otherwise. 2 days later, Detective Avery Hale walked in wearing a rumpled suit and a skeptical expression. "Mind if I look at your security feeds?" she asked. She'd seen the video and recognized Sonia's face. Miguel brought her to the back office and cued the footage from the night Sonia disappeared. Between 2 o'clock and 2:17 a.m., the recording went black. No static, no glitch, just a clean missing segment. Avery frowned. "That's not normal," she said. "Who handled deliveries that night?" Miguel scanned the log. One name popped up repeatedly. Victor Cole, a contractor who handled late-night supply runs and returns. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the freezer. That night, after the detective left, Miguel stayed late to clean. The store was silent except for the steady hum of refrigeration. He opened the freezer to restock, and the entire glass surface clouded at once, thick white breath blooming like a storm. Dozens of faces pressed against the mist, men, women. Some he recognized from missing person flyers. Their eyes stared out in a silent chorus. One face pushed closer than the rest, lips forming a single word. Victor Miguel stumbled back, heart hammering. A soft clink drew his eyes downward. A small button, dark with moisture, rolled across the tile to stop against his boot. It was the kind of button sewn on Sonia's uniform shirt. The store phone rang, startling him. He grabbed the receiver. Detective Hale's voice came through, low and urgent. "Miguel, I need you to open the back room now." He looked at the freezer. The faces lingered, waiting. His hand tightened on the receiver as cold air curled around his ankles. Miguel's fingers trembled on the receiver. The store was silent except for the low hum of refrigeration and the soft hiss of the air conditioning. "Detective," he said. "Open the back room," Detective Hale repeated. "I'm on my way. Don't touch anything else." The line clicked dead. Miguel set the phone back in its cradle and stared at the freezer door. The overlapping faces were still there, faint but distinct, like a crowd pressing against thick glass. He forced himself to look away and headed toward the rear storage area. The back room smelled of cardboard and bleach. Boxes of snack cakes were stacked in leaning towers, a familiar chaos. Miguel flicked on the overhead light and crouched to examine the floor. Nothing seemed out of place until he noticed a faint trail of moisture, as if someone had dragged a wet cloth from the freezer toward the far corner. At the end of the trail lay a tiny metal tag, the kind used to lock supply trucks. Its stamped number looked familiar, the last digits of the delivery code from the night Sonia disappeared. A car door slammed outside. Moments later, Detective Hale stepped through the entrance with a flashlight and a notepad. "Show me," she said. Miguel led her to the tag and explained what he'd seen. Hale turned the object over in her gloved hand, then pulled a small evidence bag from her coat. "This is a match for the supplier route Victor Cole handles," she said quietly. "We've been looking into him for other thefts." They returned to the office to review the store's digital logs. Hale examined timestamps and delivery slips. "These returns don't add up," she murmured, tapping the screen. "High-value goods marked as spoiled, but no disposal records. Classic diversion scheme." She closed the laptop and gave Miguel a steady look. "Did Sonia ever mention anything suspicious?" She said someone kept changing her shift times, he recalled. She thought it was a scheduling glitch. Hale's jaw tightened. "I want to check the walk-in freezer and back." Miguel led the way. The temperature dropped sharply as they stepped inside. Frost clung to the metal shelves. Hale swept her flashlight across the walls. The beam caught something unexpected, a faint outline of a handprint on the inner door, embedded in a thin layer of ice. She leaned closer, and as her breath fogged the surface, a face blossomed in the frost, clear, unmistakable, eyes pleading. Hale recoiled, then steadied herself. "Did you see that?" Miguel nodded. "It's been happening every night." The face faded, leaving only the chill. Hale exhaled slowly. "I don't know what this is," she said, "but it's pointing us somewhere. Over the next 48 hours. Hale pulled delivery manifests and quietly organized a search of the supplier's warehouse on the edge of town. Miguel, drawn into the investigation almost against his will, helped identify suspicious orders and missing stock. Each night, the freezer offered new clues. A scuffed wallet that matched a missing trucker's description. A receipt bearing an address near the supplier's garage. Even a burned scrap of ledger paper that smelled faintly of diesel. The final break came when a refrigerated trailer in Victor's fleet was impounded. Inside, officers found pallets of stolen merchandise and, more chillingly, patches of ice etched with ghostly impressions of faces. One of Victor's drivers, pale and shaking, confessed to helping divert shipments into an accident involving Sonia when she caught them unloading after hours. He claimed her body had been hidden in a drainage culvert near the marsh. Detective Hale led a team to the location. Miguel, unable to stay away, stood behind the police tape as they unearthed a shallow grave. Sonia's name was whispered by more than one officer when her ID was recovered. Victor Cole was arrested the next morning. During questioning, he denied everything until the interrogation room's small refrigerator began to frost over despite being unplugged. A face surfaced in the thin layer of ice. Sonia, her eyes fixed on him. Witnesses swore the temperature dropped several degrees. Victor's composure cracked. He admitted to orchestrating the theft ring, to threatening employees who questioned missing goods, and to struggling with Sonia when she confronted him. He claimed she fell. That panic drove him to hide the body. He never mentioned the strange appearances of faces, and when pressed, he shook his head violently. insisting he'd seen nothing. In the weeks that followed, the 7-Eleven replaced its freezer and scrubbed every surface. Reporters called Miguel the night manager who solved a murder, but he rejected interviews. He kept the evidence button in a small box at home, unsure whether it belonged to Sonia or someone else. One rainy evening after the case closed, Miguel returned to the store to cover a shift. The new freezer gleamed, spotless and modern. He wiped the glass with a cloth, and for a moment his own reflection stared back until another image slowly formed beside it. A woman's profile, unfamiliar, lips parted as if to speak. The temperature dipped, and a single bead of water trickled down the inside of the glass. Miguel stepped back, heart thudding. Somewhere beyond the parking lot, a siren wailed, then faded into the night. The face lingered a heartbeat longer, then dissolved, leaving only the faint outline of breath on the spotless door. Rafe Molina unlocked the front door of his corner market, just as a pale slice of dawn touched the street. The metal gate groaned, and the scent of last night's rain clung to the air. Inside, the quiet felt almost too clean, the hum of the coolers, the only sound. He breathed in the familiar blend of coffee, detergent, and cardboard, a smell that meant the store was alive in his. Ivy Park followed a few steps behind, rubbing sleep from her eyes and balancing a clipboard against her hip. "Another long day," she said with a half-smile. She was quick, organized, always on top of schedules. Dante Morales came in last, earbuds in, hoodie up, tossing a casual wave as he ducked behind the shelves to stock the dairy section. The store woke with them. Lights flickered on. Coolers buzzed, and Evie Ruiz, the morning cashier, arrived with a paper cup of coffee and a gossip-laden hello. Everything was as it always was until Ivy stopped mid-deal. "Rafe," she called, her voice tight. "You need to see this." He joined her at the small electronics shelf where a brand-new Bluetooth speaker sat in a neat box. That wasn't unusual except for one thing. It had been stolen last week. Rafe remembered the late-night rush, the security footage showing a shadow ducking out with it. They had shrugged it off as a loss. Now it was back, perfectly placed. "Did you put this here?" he asked Ivy. "No. Did you?" Dante shook his head from across the aisle. "Maybe somebody felt guilty," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. Rafe opened the box. Nestled inside was a worn photograph of a teenage girl with bright eyes and a scrap of denim embroidered with a tiny sunflower. He frowned. "Strange," he murmured. Ivy's eyes widened. "I've seen her face," she said. "On a missing person flyer at the bus stop. Maya Reyes. She disappeared months ago." They exchanged uneasy glances. Maybe someone had left it as a sick joke. But the photo's edges were soft from handling, as if someone had carried it for years. The next morning brought another surprise. A power drill appeared on the shelf where hardware specials sat. Rafe had never stocked that brand. Inside the box lay a child's plastic ring and a bus transfer ticket stained with something brown. Ivy's notebook filled quickly over the following days. A jacket folded perfectly with dried grass in the pocket. An expensive bottle of perfume with a note scrawled on paper. 13, Redmond Street Unit, B. Each item matched a stolen product on their inventory list. Each carried something personal. Evie recognized one photograph from an old neighborhood poster. Another relic, a charm bracelet, matched a description in a news article about a missing college student. "This isn't random," Ivy whispered, as she added another entry to her growing list. "It's like the shelf is bringing them back." Rafe tried to stay rational. Maybe a thief with a conscience. Maybe someone planting clues. But the details were too intimate, too pointed. He called the police. Detective Laura Chen arrived that afternoon, sharp-eyed and calm. She listened while Rafe explained and Ivy showed her the notebook. Chen examined the items, her brow furrowed. The photograph of Maya Reyes, she said, was never released to the public. Only the family had it. Security footage showed strange gaps-to-minute blackouts during the overnight hours. Chen requested inventory logs and promised to investigate. "Could be an inside job," she said, "or someone using your store as a drop." The theory hung heavy. Dante shifted nervously whenever the shelves came up. Evie mentioned she'd once seen a plain white van idling behind the market late at night. Rafe felt the walls closing in. Then the shelf delivered the most disturbing item yet. A small wooden music box appeared one dawn, carved with the name T. Reyes. When Ivy turned the key, it played a single, haunting note of a lullaby. Rafe's stomach dropped. His wife used to hum that tune to their niece, Maya's little sister. Inside the lid lay another folded note. Locker 7, East Point Storage. Ivy's voice trembled. We need to tell Detective Chen. Rafe nodded, reaching for the phone. Before he could dial, it rang loud in the quiet store. This is Chen, the voice said, clipped and urgent. We traced a recent off-record shipment to Warehouse 7. Officers are en route. Don't touch anything. Stay inside. A heavy knock echoed across the market, rattling the glass door. Outside, headlights swept the front windows, casting long, thin shadows across the shelves. The fluorescent lights flickered and buzzed overhead. Rafe placed a steadying hand on the return shelf. The items there seemed to gleam under the harsh light, silent witnesses waiting to speak. Another knock, harder this time, made the jars on a nearby shelf tremble. Through the glass, a silhouette stood motionless, a shape he didn't recognize. The store's familiar hum felt suddenly alive, as if the shelves themselves were holding their breath. Rafe gripped the counter as the silhouette outside the glass door remained still, bathed in the glow of the street lamp. Ivy whispered, "Should we open it?" But he shook his head. The store was silent except for the soft buzz of the lights and the hum of the refrigerators. A sudden flash of red and blue streaked across the parking lot. Detective Chen stepped into view, her badge catching the light. Rafe exhaled and unlocked the door. Chen entered briskly, a uniformed officer behind her. "Everyone okay?" she asked, scanning the aisles. "Yes," Rafe said. But someone was standing. He gestured toward the glass, but the silhouette was gone. Only an empty parking lot stared back. Chen set a small tablet on the counter. "We just searched East Point Storage," she said. "Locker 7 contains several stolen items and other things. We're processing them now." She lowered her voice. There were personal effects belonging to 3 missing persons, including Maya Reyes. Ivy clasped a hand over her mouth. Dante shifted uneasily near the cooler. Chen continued, "The items in that locker match what's been appearing here. Someone's returning evidence before we can even find it." Rafe led her to the shelf. The music box still sat in its place, its carved name clear under the fluorescent lights. Chen crouched to examine it, then looked up. "Did any of you move or touch these after the first discovery?" "No," Rafe said. "We didn't dare." Chen's gaze flicked to Dante. "What about you?" Dante shrugged, but his voice was thin. I just stocked shelves." Before anyone could speak, a soft scrape echoed from the back room. All eyes turned toward the sound. Chen motioned for silence and drew her flashlight. They moved cautiously past the freezer, toward the storage area. The door to the back room was ajar, though Rafe was sure he'd shut it earlier. Inside, the air smelled faintly of damp cardboard and something metallic. On the center table sat a brown paper bag that none of them recognized. Chen slipped on gloves and opened it. Inside lay a folded store apron and a cracked cell phone. The apron bore the market's logo and a name stitched in fraying thread, Dante. Dante's face drained of color. "That's not mine," he stammered. Chen examined the phone, scrolling through recent messages. "These texts are to a contact labeled V. Times and dates line up with each reported theft." Dante backed toward the door. "It's not what you think. I only helped move a few boxes. I didn't know anyone would get hurt." Rafe stared, stunned. "Why is she?" Dante swallowed hard. "Vince said no one would notice. Just wanted a place to stash stuff overnight. I didn't know about the others until it was too late." The overhead light flickered. Sudden cold draft swept through the room, raising goosebumps on Rafe's arms. The shelves in the next aisle rattled softly, as if something unseen brushed past. Then a music box note chimed from the front of the store, the same haunting lullaby from earlier. Everyone turned. They walked back to the returned shelf. The music box lid was open, turning slowly on its own. Beside it rested a new object, a silver key with a tag reading Pier 12. Chen exhaled. "Vince must be hiding there." She looked at Dante. "Where is he now?" "He works the night shift at the South Pier warehouse," Dante whispered. "I swear I didn't know about the people." Chen motioned to her partner. "Stay with them," she ordered, then turned to Rafe. "I'll need you to give a statement after we bring him in." The officers left, lights flashing into the dark. The store settled back into uneasy silence. Ivy slumped onto a stool, rubbing her temples. "This is unreal," she murmured. Rafe stared at the shelf. "It's like they're guiding us," he said. "The ones who were lost." Hours later, just before dawn, Chen returned. Her expression was grim, but resolute. "We found Vince at the pier," she said. "He confessed to the theft ring and to harming Maya when she discovered the operation. He'll face charges for all of it." Relief washed over Rafe, but a strange heaviness lingered. "The things that showed up here, how do we explain that?" Chen shook her head. "Some evidence can't be explained. Maybe the victims needed someone to listen." As the first light of morning crept through the windows, the shelf looked ordinary again, just wood and metal. But Rafe swore the music box gave one last soft chime as if in gratitude. He reached out and gently closed its lid. For the first time in days, the store felt still. Yet in the quiet, he could almost sense the presence of those who had guided them, voices unspoken. Finally at peace, leaving behind only the memory of a shelf that refused to forget. Mark Diaz had learned the city by the way it smelled at night, the hot oil from the diner on 3rd, the wet cardboard behind the warehouses, the sour tang of spilled soda under the 7-Eleven awning. Driving for the overnight runs, he kept a loose rhythm. Pick up, drop off, short coffee break at Lena's counter, then back on the road. The money was steady enough to keep his sister's tuition caught up and the radiator in his old Chevy working another winter. That was the life he'd built, small and reliable. He stopped at the 7-Eleven for the same reason he always did. The deli made a passable roast beef. Lena wrapped it like she knew you'd be eating it in the cab, one-handed while the radio played low. "LA tonight," she called as she slid the sandwich across the counter. "Same as usual," Mark said. He handed her a 10, plucked the wax paper from her, and moved on to the van. In the back seat, he found a cigarette butt stuck under a floor mat and a receipt stamped from yesterday's stop. The city felt softer at 2 in the morning. Headlights had a way of smoothing edges. Between the second and third drop, he unwrapped the sandwich. Because the heat had scraped the bread crust hard, he'd worked with the habit of a man who had eaten hundreds of convenience store meals without thinking about any of them. And that when his thumb brushed something that was not bread. A folded slip of paper tucked under the wax. He unfolded it with the slow, careful motion of someone who doesn't want to tear a letter. At first it looked like a receipt listings and times, but then he read, "Midnight drop, Pier B, 2:15, move crate. 42, Watchman, Vance, door codes, 5312, 2184. Help, they'll come for me." There were 3 addresses written under that, and a name that looked like a nickname scrawled in the corner. The handwriting was small and shaky, like someone had cramped the words into the space without time. Mark's mouth went dry. Read it twice, then folded the note back up and slid it into the inner lid compartment, where he kept bills and a pen. For a second, he thought about tossing a trash in the next dumpster. Forget the whole thing, but it felt heavier than paper. He called Lena, his voice trying to be casual. "Hey, does anyone ever do that kind of special order? Like someone slips a paper in a sandwich?" Lena's laugh died quick. "Not that I've seen." "You sure it was there when you grabbed it?" "Yeah," he heard clink of mugs. "Listen, do you know a guy named Vance? It's been at logistics around here." A pause. "You mean Eddie Vance?" "The one who handles the late runs? He pays cash. Some drivers take his jobs, some don't." "Why?" Mark heard the small friction of conscience in his own chest. "Just keep your eyes out, okay? I'm going to hold on to the slip." They said goodbye, and he kept the engine idling, looking at the street like it might be different. He Googled the first address on his phone and found nothing immediate, just a warehouse complex a few miles down by the freight tracks. The times on the note matched runs he'd been asked to make by a supervisor 2 weeks earlier. Extra drop-offs that weren't on the manifest, cash under the table. He remembered the night a pallet had been reloaded into his van without paperwork and the sleeve of a box that had been torn open. He had shrugged it off then. He needed work, and the tip had been good. Mark hated the name Vance now in the same private way he hated cold pizza and annoyance that stayed in the back of the throat. He thought about calling someone 911, the non-emergency line, but he imagined the questions and the way a good job disappeared if you suddenly had a police record nearby. He'd watched men lose their lives over smaller things than silence. For the rest of his route, he kept turning the note over in his mind, like a coin he couldn't decide to spend. At a late-night laundromat, he found himself staring at his reflection in the glass, the slip of paper pulling like a magnet in his back pocket. He thought, without wanting to admit it, that someone had hidden the note on purpose for somebody to find. Who would do such a thing and hope the right man opened it? It seemed a fragile kind of desperation. That night, his sleep was thin as tissue. He dreamt of someone pressing a finger against the inside of a pane of glass, finger too warm for the cold. When he woke at 1 a.m., the dream's pressure still hugged his ribs. He could have told himself he was being ridiculous sanity and the night is expensive, but when your sister's tuition relies on you, small risks take on the scale of possible salvation. He was turning off the interstate exit toward the freight yards, where the edge of town smelled of oil and old paper. He told himself he'd just look. Pull up in his van, park on a shadowed side street, scope it out. Lena called twice, and he declined both times. He didn't want her involved. The warehouse district squatted low and flat, a fossil of brick and corrugated steel. At Pier B, the loading dock lights hung like tired stars. A white van, plain and older, idled near the far edge with its hazard lights on. Mark cut the engine and sat a long minute listening to his own breathing. He had no badge, no title, just a faded company logo on the door and a bunch of fragile motives. He moved like the hours had taught him, slow, careful, checking sight lines, keeping his head low. At the dock's shadow, he found it. A wooden crate marked 42, stenciled in black. Someone had wrapped a length of duct tape around the seam, and the tape bore the initials EV faint from the printing. His palm found the cardboard. It was warm still, as if someone had set it there minutes ago. A low hum of an engine came up from behind. Headlights swept across the asphalt, sudden and white. Mark's hand went numb against the crate. He slid back into the deeper shadow, breath even and hollow. The footsteps were deliberate, too many for just a passerby. A shape loomed at the van's door, and a voice barked short, sharp. Mark could hear Name's Vince Wan move it. The crate shivered as someone nudged it. He pressed the folded slip into his fist, fingers worrying the paper until the edges creased. The engine noise swelled, and the shadow edged closer. He wanted to run, to take the note and hand it over to someone official, but the moment had already seized him. He had a choice now. Stay hidden and call it in, or step forward and risk everything to find out what the crate really held. The headlights washed the dock in white. For a heartbeat, Mark saw inside the crate a flash of something familiar, a rag of denim. The corner of a child's drawing, a scrap that matched the handwriting on the note. He swallowed and, without thinking how stupid it sounded, heard in his head a quiet instruction, as if someone else had put it there. Check the bottom. Don't let them see you. He slid his other hand under the crate where the pallet met the wood and felt the faint give of a loose slat. A van door slammed. Voices turned. Someone laughed, low and dangerous. Mark's hand closed on something cold at the bottom of the crate. The headlights found him. The headlights cut across the dock like a blade. Mark froze, feeling the cardboard press into his fingers. For a moment, the world narrowed to the sound of boots on concrete and the high, nervous engine drone. A hand clamped the crate's edge. Someone muttered a curse, and the pallet shifted, and Mark's heart hammered in his throat. He had one choice: run or be seen. He pulled his hand free and backed into shadow, the slip of paper folded tight in his fist. He watched as two men, one broad, one wire, crouched and peered under the crate, voices low and efficient. The broad one barked orders into a phone. The wiry one slid open the duct-taped seam and hauled out a plastic-wrapped bundle. They lifted it into the van with practiced hands. No fuss, no paperwork. Mark crept away with the slightest of footfalls, breath held like a secret prayer. He slid into his van, the engine clicked alive like soft thunder, and he drove without headlights until he passed the last of the dock lights. On the road, his hands shook. He smelled oil and something coppery on his gloves. Tucked into the bottom of his jacket was the corner of a child's drawing. He debrushed against inside the crate a small sketch of a sun with a crooked smile. He wrapped it in a napkin and drove straight to the precinct. Detective Priya Nunda met him at the front desk with the professional patience of someone who'd seen men walk in with stories 100 ways removed from truth. He told her everything in a rush, how he'd found the note, the crate, the van, the men. He handed over the child's drawing and the folded slip. Nanda read the note twice, her face tightening at the line, "Help. They'll come for me. We take reports like this seriously," she said. "But we need evidence, names, locations, a pattern. You did the right thing coming here." Her voice was steady, but Mark heard the underlying map of skepticism. An ordinary man at midnight, a midnight claim. Still, she called in a team, pulled manifests, and began tracing the initials on the duct tape. The investigation moved with the precision and boredom of real police work. Tracing RFID tags on pallets, calling the logistics company, subpoenaing route manifests. The slips' timestamps matched a series of off-manifest run shipments that appeared in the logs, as returns or reconsolidations, but were never recorded in inventory. A name kept turning up as the approving supervisor, Eddie Vance. A driver's signature matched a temp who'd left town 2 days prior. Nanda assigned surveillance to the pier and to a small warehouse on the south side. She asked Mark to help with a sting, drive his van on a scheduled route, and keep a discreet eye on any unlisted pickups. Mark agreed, fists clenched around a new resolve. Lena insisted on coming with him to the briefing. She wanted no part of danger but refused to be left in the dark. On the third night, their patience paid off. At 2:15, a plain van rolled up to the south warehouse under the cover of a fog bank. Men moved crates with the same furtive choreography Mark had seen. Quick, silent, practiced. Mark's van sat a block away with a stationary camera mounted on its dash. Nanda's team waited down the lot with uniforms hidden in warrants at the ready. When the men loaded a marked crate into their van and closed the doors, a cruiser cut them off. Officers poured out. Shouts cracked the night. The men scattered, some bolting for the yard, one lunging for a pallet jack. Nanda's voice was clipped as she barked orders. They cuffed for found cash in hidden compartments and opened the crates to reveal a painful collage. Stolen electronics, bundled jewelry, and in a plastic bin beneath boxes, personal items, photos, children's toys, a hair ribbon that matched the drawing Mark had found. One of the detained men broke within an hour. "I had been a temp hired through a subcontractor, pressed to take extra runs for cash that paid his rent. Vince promised protection," he said, voice raw. "If anyone asked, we made it look like returns. If someone saw too much, Vance told us to make them disappear." He looked old before his time, shoulders hollowed by relief and guilt. They found more by following the paper trail. False invoices issued to shell companies, GPS routes that looped past decommissioned docks. And a ledger burned, then reconstituted from charred remains in a garden dumpster behind the foreman's house. Forensics matched fingerprint smudges on tape and fabric fibers from crates to textiles found in storage units rented under aliases. Each discovery tightened the noose around Eddie Vance in his circle. Nanda confronted Vance at his office with a stack of evidence ledgers, receipts, witness statements. He denied at first with the cool arrogance of a man accustomed to bending rules. But when officers placed images of the personal items on the desk, photos of a girl identified as Maya Reyes, a bracelet found in a crate, something in him snapped. His face went slack as if a hand had flipped a switch. He muttered names, dates, deliveries, the names of men he'd used as buffers. He insisted accidents had happened, panics had ensued, that no one had meant for anyone to die. The scale of complicity, 20 men deep, unfolded like a rotten bloom. In the weeks that followed, warrants opened storage lockers and yards across the county. Families received boxes. The missing returned, at least in fragments. A shoe here. A child's drawing there. A name that fit a life people had stopped looking for. Court filings swelled. The newsroom called. Mark went back to his van now and then and caught himself glancing at the passenger seat, where the folded slip sat in a small, clear envelope. He didn't like being a small part of a bigger machine, but he slept a sliver easier. The sting could not mend everything. Some men took plea bargains out of fear, others were convicted. The neighborhood hummed with an awkward half-relief, like a town that had been bruised and found a bandage. Mark kept on driving, deliveries folding into their old rhythm, Lena greeting him with coffee and the same easy joke. He liked life returning to its small mercies, the late-night diner. His sister home from a weekend shift, the radiator clanking less. One damp morning, while sorting trash and receipts in the van, he unfolded a napkin and found another slip tucked inside. The handwriting was different, more hurried, but the single word at the bottom made his stomach drop. Not finished. He stared at it until the streetlight blurred. Somewhere, he realized, the ledger had more pages. The ring had been larger than one city. The thought that someone else might still be using common object sandwiches, crates, returned products to smuggle secrets tightened in his chest like cold wire. He folded the new note and slid it into his pocket, the paper a little warmer than it had any right to be. Then he started the engine and drove on.